Hi.
Wait, what is that behind you?
Ah, it's a detail of one of my favorite artworks, which is the Santa Teresa di Avila having her ecstasy. Let me move.
That is very interesting. So
But
this
that's
this
it.
guy, well, this is not quite it if you look closely. If you see this big Bitcoin thing behind him.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So
I
when
thought you
I
might
when
like that.
I when I first came to the space, this guy is a painter from the UK named Trevor Jones. And he was one of the most like popular people in the space before I came. And this piece, he made this like Bitcoin angel piece and like sold a freaking, bazillion copies of it that are now not worth so much.
But their images, they're like NFTs or they're just image.
He was taking paintings and then like scanning them in and making NFTs out of them. Um,
Aha.
and
What?
yeah, it's just kind of funny that it's sort of that thing, and it was like the cover of like a book or something. Uh,
Huh.
but it's
But
just
you
funny
didn't,
because I'd
yeah.
seen that image before. I didn't know he copied it like so completely from another painting, though.
It's not a painting, it's a sculpture.
Oh,
Uh,
that's a sculpture.
Yes, if you look at it
Ah.
online, it's a marble and bronze sculpture. And it's one of my
Mm.
favorite artworks in the world. It's really beautiful. It's in a small chapel called the Cappella
I
Corna.
see now. Now I can see them here. I can see them right like I can see his and the other ones right here. Like I can see now that it's a sculpture and that's like uh
It's
big.
really amazing. I mean, it's one of them, uh, I don't know,
Wait, where was
strongest.
this? Where was this in Rome?
It's in a small chapel called La Cappella
I don't
Cornero.
think I saw it.
But the reason I chose that was because I usually put like a people every day behind, and I don't know. I didn't think that I could find one fast enough right now for this thing, and I just thought about it a few minutes ago, and then I was going to tell you about the so-called concept and transcendence, and I thought Santa Teresa was a good image for that. But before I tell you all about that, which is not the purpose, I want to say that I'm again lost.
Okay.
I don't know anything again, but I know you had a big party and you bought a crypto punk and
I
it
didn't
has a
have the party
mohawk.
yet.
I mean,
It,
I know, but I do not feel totally far from what that kid, who posted that picture that you're in the old sculpture marble studio with people who have never been on a computer. I don't feel that far
I'm like,
from
what are
that.
you talking about? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like this person's never used a computer. This
Never.
person's like, okay, none of these people have ever used a computer. What are you talking about?
I know, but at the same time, everything is so fast in your world, and I feel again completely lost. So I didn't know how to approach our conversation this time. I mean, one thing is I wanted to look at the everydays that you did in the last like 10 days and ask you about them, just going backwards. One
Okay.
was I wanted to know, I mean, another thing is I just wanted to know, there's 100 things I wanted to ask, but just to put a list out, I keep going back to why you told me about Malevich and suprematism and why I had never thought of talking to you about Malevich and suprematism because I always thought of it as something so far from your work, which I've always seen as kind of pop, in the line with pop art and representation. So the greatest artist to have said like no to everything in this massive move towards transcendence, and one of my favorite artists in on the planet, but I had never thought of talking to you about Malevich. And it keeps coming back and back and back why you were so, you didn't tell me why you're interested in what he did. So that's another thing. And then there was a bunch of other things. The question of the CryptoPunk that you bought, if that's like to support some sort of market that was crashed or something like that, or what it means to you. So what do you want to start with?
Let's bang out a few everydays, and we'll go through the other stuff.
Okay.
So do you know
So
why I did this picture?
well, somebody got into government who's old or something.
Yeah, he's pretty old. He's pretty old. This guy is like the third most powerful person in the United States, and for the second time in a month, he's just frozen because he's so fucking old and like out of his fucking mind, just completely frozen speaking. And like, I don't know if he's like, people are like saying he might be having strokes when this is happening. Like, who the fuck
But
knows?
but can you tell me who he is? Is he like the central bank?
No, his name is, he's, you know how there's Republicans and Democrats?
Yes.
He's the leader of the Republicans.
Oh, in the House.
He's he's the Speaker of the House. Or no, I'm sorry, he's the Senate Majority Leader.
And what is his name?
Mitch McConnell.
Now, that's something else that is so weird, that the United States of America is supposedly the most powerful country on the planet, maybe with China and. But I haven't heard of Mitch McConnell in my whole life. So there's this very local politics somehow that are very known to the US and to your space. But do people know who Mitch McConnell is, who
In the
follow you
United
like
States,
in
everybody
China?
knows. Yeah, everybody knows who's Mitch McConnell. I think probably because there's a little bit more turnover. I mean, if you fucking, in Russia, not so much turnover. China, not so
That's
much
true.
turnover.
That's true. But this was about him not doing turnover, not retiring.
Yeah, he's not fucking retired. And it's sort of like, again, he's only been Speaker of the House because you're only Speaker of the House if your team, party or whatever is in control. And
Right.
so his is in control right now, and he's the like sort of like top Republican congressperson. And he's 81. Which is fine if you're 81 and you are able to like think, but if you are 81 and you are not able to fucking think or even fucking speak, to me it is absolutely disgusting that you would not retire. And to be clear, he's not the only one. There's another one on the Democrat side, Dianne Feinstein, who's
Right.
probably even worse than him, which is like, what? And so, I mean, even Biden, it's like, come on, man. Like,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
way too
Biden is
fucking old. What are we talking about? Even, honestly, I hate to say it, but I just saw an interview with Trump, and he seems like 10 years, 15 years younger than Biden at this point now. It's like, oh, Jesus Christ. Everything coming out of your mouth is dumb as shit, but you seem like you fucking understand what's going on.
But what else is in this picture? What does it mean aside from the fact that he froze? Or is that all that it means? That the old people who are in power should retire because they don't
It's,
understand the world?
it's like, what are we doing? It's like, and I think it's like I don't know, this could fucking like be like a reality far in the future, that it's like fucking we keep people because we keep inventing new ways to keep people alive, but their
Right. That's what
quality
it
of
looks
life
like.
is not that good.
But
Like,
that's exactly what I thought it looked like, actually. It looks like the rich people who want their heads like frozen and then they can relive in 200 years. But you weren't referring to that.
no, it's referring to that too, that it's sort of like in the future this could be a reality where we fucking have these fucking head jar people that are fucking like running things and shit. I don't know, very far into the future, obviously, but it was mostly about like, dude, you should fucking retire. What are we fucking talking about? You're a fucking head in a jar at this point. Like, give
So
me a.
why would this be an artwork, a work of art? Or
Uh,
is it not in itself?
what do you
It,
mean? Why would it be a work of art?
well, I'm asking. I mean, is it just like part of an artwork?
Well, I said it's a work of art, so I guess I would put the question on you. Why would you say it's not a work of art?
Well, this is the typical debate we're always having. because Marcel Duchamp says that you can say that something's a work of art and then it's a work of art. But that's fine. But I still never get answers from you. You just say that it's a work of art. Well, I sometimes say, but maybe the whole thing is a work of art, like
What do you
you
mean?
and the whole thing, you and the relations and the social media comments, and the fact of not being lost because there's this person who makes this picture every day. So feeling part of like a community of people, I start to feel that way sometimes
It's
when I
more so,
don't.
I guess I would approach it this way. If this was a painting, do you think you would ask me if this is a work of art?
Yes, I could, because it
I
could be
don't think you
an
would ask me if it
illustration.
was a work of art if it was a painting. I think you would assume it was a work of art if it was a painting.
Well, I've kind of gone beyond that thinking. We've gone through that before. I mean, the fact that you make the painting of Sam Bankman-Fried makes it a work of art. I'm not sure. I think that that's you wanting to adapt like a chameleon to
No, no, no.
the
I'm just saying, like,
space.
let's say
I
this
mean,
was not a JPEG. It was not a JPEG. I had made this exact same image, but I had made it physically on a canvas. Do you think you would ask me if this is a work of art?
well, I could
You
because
could, but I don't think you would, because I think you would assume it was a work of art because you would be like, well, it's a painting. Of course it's a work of art.
well, I don't know. That's something we discussed 6 months ago, and I think it worked. It works or worked in a way, at the beginning. But I think more that you're making the painting to go into the museum, like it looks so good in our museum, because it's the medium that connects to that kind of a container, like a JPEG connects to an in the web, and a painting connects better to a museum space. So it's like you're though I use the word chameleon, those like lizards that change color according to where they are, and you find the medium which is right for the place where you're putting it, the image.
Because
um
to me, the artwork is the ideas in it and not so much the physical thing. But I think the reason
yeah.
that we've gone through this a number of times is I'm not sure your attitude has actually changed to understand my perspective that it doesn't matter that it's a JPEG.
No, well, I'm trying. Well, it's not that my attitude doesn't change. I'm trying to understand constantly, because
Not
you
that I'm
say
saying
that
your
it's the
attitude
quantum.
should change. Everybody's entitled to their thing, but I think personally, I could be wrong. I think you're still, and a lot of people are still hung up on the fact that this is a JPEG and not a canvas, and that makes it harder to digest as a work of art. And I do not believe that will be the case in the future.
No, I keep answering to you that I think that it's more in the line of like Joseph Beuys' work of art. So social sculpture, the concept of the social sculpture was a revolution in art. That the artwork is not just in its physical materiality, but in the relations and the structural relations between people and the materials that the artist puts in a space. So I don't see your work as before Joseph Beuys. I mean, that I see it as a very, very important social sculpture, and that's probably why you're interested in the CryptoPunks.
I'm interested. So we can go through. Let's go through a couple more of these things here. So this is, I
Okay.
don't know. This was more like more abstract. But this to me is actually an abstract work. And I don't think a lot of people would look at it like that, but to me, this is like
Now it looks abstract. I agree.
an abstract sort of like idea. This
Mm.
is another one that's a
No,
bit
but
sort of like,
could you go back to the abstract for a second? So this is like something that a spaceship in the shape of an eye, or that just fell to Earth, or a rock.
no, This is more of an abstract idea of a lot of times in my pieces, I'll use spheres, and I'll use either white
Yes.
spheres or black spheres. The white spheres mean good things, and the black spheres mean bad things. And so it's more of a general, it's not, again, it's abstract. It's not trying to say this is a sphere that came to Earth and spheres are going to come to Earth in the thing. It's completely abstract. It's
But
about
it's a feeling? You mean it's more like a feeling?
100%. It's
A
not more like
feeling,
a feeling, it's completely a feeling.
a feeling of something alien that's you're saying hello to.
Of something good and bad. Of
Because of the
something
black in the
good
middle.
with something bad inside of it.
Do these images come to your mind in dreams or in like psychedelic drugs or things or mushrooms?
They don't come in dreams. Maybe we'll have to edit this part out for my wife.
No, we'll edit everything.
A little of the other, but not psychedelics.
Technically speaking, have you changed like in the preceding one? Sorry, I keep going back to it, but I like it very much, the abstract one. Has the technique to make it changed, or is it still the way that you did them before, octane and rendered in cinema?
No, my technique, honestly, my technique of making these has not changed. I would say in probably, it hasn't, it's minor things, but it's not changed that much in probably 3 or 4 years. It's still very
So,
much the same kind of like way.
okay, so the AI word to image and all that stuff you don't use very
I've
much.
used it a little bit. Let me see if I can find one where I've used it. It's more so I've used it to make the image better. Honestly don't use it that much. Here's one. Let me see if I can find the
Ooh,
722. Here's the wristbands for the CryptoPunks meetup.
that is how happened last night.
No, it's not for a month. It's not, it's September 30th.
Oh, September 30th, not August 30th. But September 30th, you're doing like a meeting, a physical meeting.
Yeah, of all the like CryptoPunks like holders, like a CryptoPunks like sort of like meetup or whatever.
And in the meantime, in the space, physical space, you have all these works about CryptoPunks that you selected.
There's no. We're actually gonna like block off the like gallery. It's all pretty much gonna be in the experiential space. There is
Right.
one guy who's kind of like made these sort of like CryptoPunk sculptures. Who's bringing some like some of his sculptures, but otherwise it will be almost entirely like digital.
But excuse me, before we go to this, the CryptoPunk, but you did like a competition. People submitted work. And did you choose the work by yourself or?
Yes, but I chose almost. It wasn't. It was quite inclusive. It was sort of like if you made work. I mean, there's a lot of shit in there that I
Okay,
don't. That's fucking
okay,
garbage, to be honest.
okay.
But
So,
also edit that out. But like it was more like, okay, if you make something, we'll show it or whatever, as long as it's actually CryptoPunk related or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of garbage there. So this can kind of show you a little bit more so like basically a lot of times I'll feed an image in to, instead of putting just text, I'll basically make the image like 75% of the way there. And then I'll feed that image in as the input for AI, and then it will just change it a little bit. And then I'll take that back in, and then I'll sort of like composite that over my image. And like the parts that I like, then it's like, oh, this part I like here. And so I'll keep that. And like this, I'll like, that's not quite how I want. So then I'll like you know, like erase a piece here to make it look sort of like more like the original. So I can kind of like just take tiny pieces of AI.
But what does it mean, the AI? What kind of an AI? You feed it into what?
Stable diffusion.
Stable diffusion. But then you put words and you say,
You can put words too here. Actually, I can just do it right here and show you. I gotta start it up though. Where is the thing? This will take a sec to start up.
mm,
Um,
but I
yeah,
mean,
so
to change the image that you make, you put the image, you upload it into
it
stable
changes it a
diffusion.
little. It doesn't, it just kind of, it changes it. Sometimes I'll do it and it won't make the image better. It's like, does it make it better, closer, more interesting to what I'm sort of like thinking? Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the images are they're way too, most of the images are way, like you couldn't put them, like you couldn't put this. You couldn't put, okay, I want two people standing next to a podium with flags around them, and there's a bunch of like, you know, news microphones, and then a guy with a medical mask is holding up Mitch McConnell's head in a robotic jar. You couldn't put that. It would just be a pile of mush. It would
Right.
not anything like it. And
So
so
you're
that's what
not
I also
worried.
think are interesting about these images, is that they're kind of like AI proof in a way, that the ideas are so complex that AI can't quite get there yet. I believe in the future it will be able to, but right now it couldn't make most of these images, to be quite honest.
I found very interesting that you sent me this example of a joke. You asked some AI to make a joke,
Oh,
and it was a very bad joke. I mean, the jokes were
that
very
was pretty
bad.
much just trashing NFTs. It was like, okay.
No,
I
but
thought
it
that
was
was pretty
interesting
funny.
because it's the first time I thought that maybe one could prove the difference between human consciousness and machines by the fact that they don't really get the sense of humor. I mean, because everyone is always asking, but do they love? You know, can they fall in love? But it's harder to verify what love is, while a joke is really easy to verify.
I
And
think they'll be able to make jokes, to be honest. I think they'll be able to make funny jokes in the future. I
I'm
think
not
it's I
sure.
think it's very tough. I don't I think it can make joke. I think it'll be able to make jokes pretty quick. So
Well, let's go
here's
back
one
to
here.
your.
So this is the program. This is the AI. So I
Mhm.
could put in no text and just be like, okay, give me this exact same thing back. Um, and it will generate. Actually, I don't know what it'll generate if you put absolutely no text. See, and this scale right here basically says how much you stick to the image and how much you kind of like dream up whatever you want on yourself. So the lower I put this, the more it will stick close to this image. So I can make it so that it doesn't change it like that much. For some reason it's going very slow though, because I've got a bazillion things open. Yeah, I don't know if this is gonna actually fucking do it.
That's okay. We don't have to
Yeah,
do
this
it.
is kind
I
of like,
mean,
you can kind of see this is sort of like roughly how it works. We'll see if this works later.
yes,
Um,
but
yeah,
going,
so
but maybe the most important thing I haven't asked you before we go back to your last 10 days of everydays is how you see the situation, like what you're thinking about doing, the moves that you're making, the moves, you know, whatever they are, like moves in the traditional art world, moves in the space, moves in buying things, selling things. I mean, how are you feeling? What is like your strategy and towards what right now?
well, I think right now we're obviously in a space where there is a lot of disillusionment. So there you can kind of see it starting there. So you can kind of see it took the same image, but it didn't make it. So you could say Now I could put a giant emoji with people walking towards it. And then if I wanted to, I could say submerged in water to like change it a bit. And so now if I do this, now it will basically take this plus this text and try and make something from it. Instead of just saying a giant emoji with people walking towards the submerged in water. Well, that could look a million different ways.
Right.
So this will make something that's like pretty close to that. So now you can see there's some water over here. It didn't quite get the...
No, it's not submerged at all.
No, it's not submerged. Well, that's because I put this down and said stick pretty close to the image. If I put this up higher, now it's like, okay, you can get a little bit more creative. Now you'll see what it will come up with that's a little bit more creative, where it's not sticking quite so close to the image. Now you can see it submerged in water. But now you can see the emoji looks all like kind of like fucked up.
Yes.
So then basically I can take my image where I started from, and then I can take this image and composite it on top of it. And it's like, oh, well, I kind of like how these people look. And I can take both of these into Photoshop and like sort of like mix between them. You know what I mean? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
that's how I use it. So it's kind of, it's not using it to just come up with anything. It's using it to like make my images look better to me, in my opinion, look like closer to what I'm like thinking. So it's really kind of just using it as another sort of like tool.
Okay, but you don't use it very much, you said.
I don't use it very much because most of the time it like this, it will come up with something like this where it's like, nah, this isn't really like better. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Not
Like the
very
people look
original
all
or
like mushy and like the face looks mushy because again, most of the time the ideas and like the picture is too complex that it can't, AI just can't get it. It will just fuck things up and it'll just make it look worse.
Okay, so going back to the last 10 days um of images of everydays. So this man got arrested or something or fired from his
This guy,
company.
this guy got fired from his company. This BitBoy guy got fired from his company, and he was kind of a like scammer dude in the space.
Well, what does it mean, these rabbits and this red, and what is the concept for you, and the oranges and the hamburgers,
Well,
and they
there's a
look
lot
like
of things.
men in black, kind of?
The 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 people sort of to me, this other guy, this guy here is the guy who's in charge of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. He's
Ah,
the person who is could potentially come after people for NFT things. And he decides what's like okay with crypto and like, you know, sort of right now he's kind of anti-crypto, but
what's his name?
his name is Gary Gensler.
Oh, yeah.
And
So,
so he's been in a couple of them. But right now, the way that they're approaching crypto seems like a fucking joke. It's very unclear, and they're kind of trying to play both sides a little bit. And that's why these heads are on here, because it's kind of like, guys, you're trying to enforce the rules, but like, this seems like a fucking clown show. What the fuck are you doing?
but what are the rules that they would like to enforce, and what are they afraid of?
I think they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They don't want to crush crypto, but they're also kind of scared of it and sort of they don't understand it and they want to be able to control it because ultimately, I think a lot, and that sort of goes for a lot of countries and sort of like governments, because if they don't control the money anymore,
Right, there's no political power.
yeah. So if suddenly Ethereum, if suddenly, you know, imagine 20 years from now, everybody used Ethereum for everything. That it was sort of like it was very easy to use. You had your money on Ethereum. It wasn't unsafe. It was just like any other bank account, and like that's what people transacted in. That would be probably not great for a lot of governments, to be honest, in terms of their power.
That's what people thought when there was the church in the power. Political power and religious power was together until the 1700s, more or less. And then the first lay non-religious governments happened, but it didn't end power.
True.
It actually, what ended was the church, sort of. I mean, the religions lost a lot of power with that separation.
And even in this case, they might not lose their power because part of the power comes from having a bunch of guns. The government still
Right.
has a bunch of guns, so they can still kind of like, oh,
Right.
really give a fuck about your little rules of Bitcoin. They show up to your door with a gun. Guess what? There's the new rules, you know?
Right. So that's what you're saying here, that the government can enforce control over these cryptocurrencies with guns. And
The guns
and
go a long way. Guns go a long way in enforcing power.
but look at what happened in Ukraine. It's going nowhere. Everybody's just fighting and throwing bombs at each other. And
Well, because both sides have guns.
right.
But if you have the people and they don't have guns, you know, or you can have guns in the United States. It doesn't matter. You don't have as many guns as the fucking military, so it's like you're not
Right.
standing with the military. Um,
But I think the power, the real power, I mean, is connected with those satellites. When I wrote to you about the 8,000 satellites or the 8,000 objects flying around, it's very, very little if we think about the size of the planet.
yeah,
To have 8,000, it's like virtually nothing. But
yeah,
it's virtually nothing. But it's still, and I think only 3,000 are like satellites. The others are trash or something like that. But it's still a new kind of structure of power. I
yeah.
mean, if you have humans squashed between the Earth and these satellites, and everything on the Earth is depending on those satellites, everything, all the power. So really, but the US government doesn't have the satellites either. That's Elon Musk. And other
That's what my so basically, long story short, I'll tell you this story, which I actually told Elon. My story was, and I wrote this in 2015. It was just maybe like 2 pages. And at that time, he wasn't even close to the most powerful like person or richest person. Like he was like the 50th richest person or something. And basically it was like, okay, these cars work out, and like suddenly everybody has these cars. And another thing I don't know if you know is he has a solar company that is making called Solar City that makes a bunch. Actually, he rolled Solar City into Tesla, but he's making a shitload of like solar powered things too.
Mm-hmm.
I believe eventually that solar power will outpace everything else. That we'll figure out how to make solar panels super cheap, and we'll just get all of our fucking energy from the sun, and it will be like fine. And we won't have to worry about all this carbon and all this bullshit. And so, in
Sorry,
a,
I just changed picture because it bothers me that the Bernini was used by that cover, by that guy. It just
it
bothers
sullied
me.
it. It ruined it for you.
Yes, well, no, the sculpture is amazing, and I hope to show it to you someday. But it was ruined in that cover. Anyway, back to
So basically he became very, very rich, where he controlled like 15% of the like all of the wealth on the in the world, because he had all these cars, he had all the satellites. He's also putting up shitloads of satellites. So then he controlled all the satellites and all this shit. But what he really wants to do is get to Mars. And so finally, in like 2050, he got to Mars, but he needed a lot of people on Mars to like colonize Mars. And so he was basically saying, okay, it was still very expensive to go to Mars. So he basically said, if you come to Mars and work for 2 years, then you can live on Mars and you get a free ticket to Mars or whatever. So a bunch of people came to Mars and they started working, but it was a lot harder than they initially sort of like realized. And it was like, wait a second, it's not really that great on Mars here. And so all the people wanted to go home then. And they're sort of like, okay, this isn't really that great. So they wanted to go home. So he realized, wait a second, if I let all these people go home, the whole project will fail. And back on Earth, things are all completely like AI. And that's another thing I don't know if you know about him, but he's very scared of AI. He's very like fearful that AI is going to like take over. That's a real like
But
fear.
it's true. It could happen
It
if,
could happen. Yes, he's not wrong. And
right.
so he didn't want everybody to go home. So basically, he was like, yeah, no, you're not going home. So all these people are basically now imprisoned on Mars. And so the governments back home are like, what the fuck are you doing? You imprisoned all these people on Mars. You're not letting them go home. So suddenly he was in a war with the rest of the world. And he took all those satellites and basically smashed them into the earth as like missiles to like fight a war with the like Earth. So basically, it was like Elon against the rest of the world, and that was kind of the like premise. And
That's
it
a
was sort of
story.
like that was a story, and I was like, oh, this could be made into like a fucking movie that I think would be super interesting and like very sort of like compelling or whatever. And the first time I met him, I told him that story, and he was kind of like, yeah, maybe that.
Mm.
He entertained it more than I thought he would. But
But
yeah,
this is just to say that I don't think the problem is cryptocurrency to lose the power of the governments. The problem is that the whole structure of everything will depend on the satellites and
well,
and who
it's
owns the
kind of
satellite.
assuming the story. My story sort of assumes a lot of things. One, it assumes AI kind of like we cede a lot of our decisions to AI, and that does not go well here. Two, it assumes the governments are so mired in their own bureaucracy bullshit that all of these companies, private citizens, become way more powerful than the governments, which I believe is
Right.
already kind of happening with all these tech companies. I believe they have, in many ways, a lot of power compared to the governments to actually change your day-to-day life. Apple
Of
could
course. But that
change
happened
something
also,
tomorrow.
yeah, that happened also in the 1700s when the bourgeoisie and the early industrial life started, and early 1800s. The kings and queens lost all their power. They were borrowing money from the industrialists, and that's how the French Revolution happened. They cut the heads off of the kings. But the problem is that um, I mean, there's a lot of problems that have to do with personal freedom.
Which
And
is very funny that it's interesting to me that you even saying freedom feels like like a political like that's an extreme right idea, freedom. It's
it's
like, wait, what?
unbelievable. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
That's how where we've gotten that's like controversial. I know what you mean. I'm not saying you're wrong. Like I think you're right. Like it does, like when you just say freedom, that makes me think that this is something that we should almost not be aiming for because it's some weird like alt-right thing, and it's like, wait a second, I don't think that's true. I think we should definitely be aiming for having more freedom. Like, the fuck are we talking about?
Well, I mean, when you have 8,000 satellites around in your head and you can't even go to the bathroom anymore or buy milk without uh, uh, these things working for you, it doesn't give you a feeling of freedom. It gives you a feeling of a very squashed humanity. So it's the AI. I think he's right about the AI being the problem, but and you can't stop it because if China and Russia and all these other places do it, you can't just stop. You have to do it. So it's like the
And that's
nuclear.
also why he didn't allow AI on Mars. And that's partially why things were taking much longer to do on Mars than they sort of like anticipated.
Hmm.
And so it's sort of like about him, like, at the end of the like sort of like movie or whatever, he's like, 95 or whatever, and he's gone kind of like fucking crazy, and he's this like fucking general dude who like fucking, runs everything. He's become this like crazy fucking like super villain, which is interesting too, because when I first wrote that, everybody universally loved Elon. It was just like, oh, he's fucking building rockets, there's a Tesla, and no, not so much. There's quite a lot of people who do not like him. And
Why?
so he's become kind of a supervillain already to a lot of people.
Because of Twitter and stuff.
Because of Twitter and because of people just like, oh, he didn't, he kind of pushed back against the COVID thing and he says what he wants and he's, doesn't love pronouns and blah, blah, blah. Like, he's just, he's not, he
Mike,
doesn't, he says whatever the fuck he wants.
but what I asked you that sort of general question, and then maybe we should go back to the last 10 days of every days. But the general question is still out there. It's not clear to me totally what your objective is. I think your objective is that because you're a great artist, like really great, revolutionary great. I think that I am convinced of that.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. But I mean, in the way though, in the way like Bernini actually was, or Andy Warhol or stuff. But I'm just trying to understand how you're. First of all, why you would even want to be an important artist. Like why? What drives that? What drives that? Like it is some. And secondly, how you're managing. I mean, with this studio and then some relations with people like me, and then some, the crypto punk move seems a very strong move, actually.
Okay, so let's go to the CryptoPunk thing. So the CryptoPunk thing, so part of the reason I built this studio was that I wanted to sort of like bring in other like groups and sort of like have more like stuff that's not just mine, that's similar to what, we're gonna do. And so to me, the first one that I wanted to sort of like do that with is CryptoPunks because they were the ones that started this whole like NFT thing. And I think that is a absolute like masterpiece work. Unintentional by their part, to be honest. I get the impression from many talks with
So
them.
they came out with these 10,000 images, which were combinations, kind of like a sort of generative art,
Yep.
combinations of like Lego faces, and they gave them out for free.
Yep.
And then
And at
one
that
was,
time, it's important to remember the idea of an NFT didn't even exist. That wasn't like a thing. Like the standard that we use for NFTs, they based partially on the CryptoPunks. Like the
uh-huh.
idea that there was 10,000 different things, that wasn't like that's not how crypto was back then. It was like you had coins. You had a coin and all the coins are the same. They're all fungible. And so they're like, wait, let's do this thing where we put 10,000 different things,
Unique coins, like
unique
10,000 unique
coins.
coins,
And
where
so that whole thing was like completely revolutionary.
what do you call it? The thing that the NFT is? It's a kind of the script, the one that I always look for on
Contract,
others.
the
Yeah, the
smart
smart
contract.
contract. So they were the like one of the first, except that those artists who were in my exhibition called Animations, Jennifer and Kevin McCoy, they actually did quantum. And that is also one of the weirdest things that to me is that when I met you and looked for you, then I realized after a year that at the origin of it all were also, strangely enough, these people that were in this show of mine about animation years before. And that's
That's
very
super.
strange to me.
I
It's,
don't think I knew that.
well, yes, you did, because I gave you the catalog of animations intuitively when we met in London. I said, what am I going to give? What am I going to give him? And I pulled out of my bookshelf this book, which was the catalog of the exhibition Animations, which was in 2001. And Animations was looking at animated images from early 20th century, like the dinosaur one, all the way to, at the time Pixar was starting, and like Tin Toy was made, and um, and also poor animation, what I called poor animation, like this taste for a very rough kind of poor, not high glossy
Yeah, like
Pixar, but the
lo-fi.
opposite. Yeah, lo-fi, like William Kentridge. And in the middle of all this, there were these artists that I don't know how they got in, because I just sort of said, "Come, come, come." And one group was Jennifer and Kevin, whom
That's crazy.
I knew really well. It was like one of their first shows. And then another artist was the one you introduced to me at your space,
Oh yeah, Joshua Davis.
Joshua Davis. I mean, it is the weirdest thing to me. This thing, it's just strange. It's like quantum physics entanglement.
Yeah.
The sort of newest and weirdest thing that I'm learning about is actually in my prehistory somehow
That
there.
see, that actually doesn't seem that weird to me because even back then you were looking for what is the newest thing. And like I agree, in 2001, when I saw Joshua Davis's work, it was like, this is the newest thing. I've never seen anything that feels more
Yeah,
futuristic than that.
yeah. But that was just to say that Kevin had made that sort of a smart contract thing with the quantum. So
He
in
did. It was
2014 or 13.
He did. I think it was a little different because they did it on like kind of like a bigger scale with like 10,000 of them like showing like generative kind of like work on the
Mm.
like blockchain. But
You mean
regardless,
the CryptoPunks,
CryptoPunks. But
right?
regardless, I think it's a very interesting project, and me buying one was partially like I first off I wanted to have the exhibition, and then it was like, oh shit, I don't even own a CryptoPunk because again, to me, like owning it or not owning it, like it doesn't. I just don't like give a shit about like the idea of owning art is still kind of weird to me, to be honest. And so I felt like I was like, I don't need a CryptoPunk to appreciate this project. Like, what is the difference of me actually having one in my wallet in terms of appreciating and shedding light on this project? But it was sort of like community wise, it probably makes more sense if I own a CryptoPunk to be throwing this party, blah, blah, blah. So that's why I sort of like did that. And because again, I buy almost no NFTs. And so that was really like the first NFT I spent like a significant amount of money on or whatever. And so that's kind of like why I sort of like bought one. But I
And
just
the one you bought, why do you like it with this mohawk? Is that, and I mean, the clown nose, I understand. It's because that's very rare. I mean, I read that that's very rare. There were
it's
only like
somewhat rare.
two.
So the reason I bought that specific one is because I knew I was going to use my CryptoPunk in like everydays, some of my like everydays,
Mhm.
that this would, be like a kind of recurring character as well. Um, and so this one had a lot of sort of like very defining features that I could play off of when
Mm.
I'm making like visualizing this CryptoPunk or whatever. So it's got a mohawk, it's got green eyes, it's got the clown nose, it's got pale skin. It just has a lot of like distinct features that I could then illustrate in my like everydays. So that's
Someone
why
wrote
I
that
chose
this
that
is,
specific one. And I feel like
someone
with the
wrote,
mohawk, it feels more like punk.
yes, but someone wrote that this is like a version of you, but it doesn't look like you to me.
This is definitely my head.
It is?
Yeah, that's a
Oh,
3D model of me.
I wonder why I don't think it looks like you. But anyway, that's what they wrote. So that is a version of you. Okay. So the mohawk doesn't have anything to do with, it's like a play on words with with the idea of the punk.
Yeah, it kind of feels more like punk like that. It felt like a more like punky sort of um like look to the other one. I think I liked the look of this one compared to like the other ones that sort of I was like looking at. But so the CryptoPunks thing to me is like kind of like a fun sort of like side thing to kind of, I don't know, play in that world and sort of um
I think it's very serious.
appreciate like another sort of like artwork and sort of like pay homage to this sort of like work that if they had never made these CryptoPunks, who the fuck knows if we would even be talking right now?
Right. I understand. So instead, on the other hand, what do you think about this monument game, this Sam Spratt?
So you've seen the piece, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
it's as an artwork, I think it's, an amazing fucking artwork or whatever. Um, and I think what he's doing is really interesting. I think what to me is sort of like new and interesting about it is the way that he is engaging people and telling a story through this piece. And I think you would have to see all of the shit. Like he's been posting all kinds of shit and sort of like, all kinds of writings and ideas and encouraging people to leave their sort of like imprint on this work in a way that you couldn't do with a painting. You couldn't be like, okay, I want 25 people to write what this painting means to them on the painting itself to make that part of the artwork. That's not
No.
something that's possible with physical artwork. And so to me, that is a new, interesting use case of this technology. Is it the most, oh my God, revolutionary thing? No, probably not. But is it something
Mm.
new and in my opinion, innovative and something that I think to me, was inspiring in terms of a new way of looking at engaging people and making the artwork feel more dynamic and more of a conversation. I think yes, to me, it very much achieved.
Mm. There have been many education programs in museums that do similar things with traditional medium. For example, when I did the Bruce Nauman exhibition, when I organized that many, many years ago, I set up a program where people could send in texts about the works, and then the best ones we would publish, and in the meantime, they would all be put in these boxes next to the works. So, and it wasn't original particularly to do that. I mean, it was wonderful because the idea of doing it came from the fact that I thought that there were very bad art critics, that art criticism writing had gone down. So I wanted to stimulate that. And it worked actually. There are quite a number of people who took part in that and who later started to become art critics for
Oh,
whatever
that's
art
fun.
form. Yeah, it worked. But I'm just saying this to say that the concept of having you write a piece about a work is and involve the audience is not per se
I think it's
original.
more so in your case, did those pieces become part of the artwork?
No, of course not. Bruce
That's what
Nauman.
that's where I think this is different and innovative. Those pieces, all these people's writing is saved to the NFT. So they're actually part of the artwork. It's
Yeah, and
not
it
just
was
like write
actually
what you think it is. It's like, no, no, those are going to be saved in the metadata of the NFT and they are part of the artwork.
yeah, well, they're part of the also. I find what's interesting is that in this collapse of values, like uh, money costs of NFTs, the average and so on, like with this situation of the last months or whatever year, it's this idea of having lots of NFTs that are very cheap um, somehow saves the project because it builds a platform altogether. It kind of looks like a mixture between a Hieronymus Bosch Garden of the Delights, with all these hundreds of figures, and a Thomas Cole, kind of colors of Thomas Cole, very close to like illustration of prehistoric people in tons of work. So where I see, and also the concept of seeing the future as this kind of post-apocalyptic landscape of prehistoric or returned to prehistory people.
I think what people are drawn to is that there is a level of craft that again, yes, have paintings that look similar to that been made 300 years ago? Yes.
Yes.
But the fact that he made this on a computer, that is definitely different. And that he is able to paint to that level on a computer.
I
There are
understand.
very few people who can do that. And so to me, yes, aesthetically, is it something that looks like it could be 300 years old? 100%. But it's not 300 years old. It was done with very different tools. It was done with tools that only existed in the last 20 years. And then I think had he just released it just that without the sort of like having people put their own sort of like imprint on it, yes, it would be, in my opinion, far less interesting.
Okay.
So I think I know what you're saying. I could see what you're saying from like a purely sort of like aesthetic standpoint of the image itself.
Okay, but I've always thought that the social media is part of your artwork.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
so that's also comments that become part of it in a way. They're not attached to the NFT though.
But that's where I think it's interesting that they are attached in this instance, that they
Okay.
are frozen with the NFT and they are truly part of the artwork. That I think is something I've not seen before. And it's a concept that I think you could, to me, what when I look at a work and if it gives me ideas of what I could do that I think nobody else has done, to me, that's something that's like good and interesting. If I look at it and it's like, that doesn't give me any ideas, then it's sort of like, it's been done before. And so to me, it was sort of like, oh, attaching people's input to the work. There's a lot of different ways you could do that. There's a lot of different rules you could set up for how that could sort of like work and ways people could interact with the work interact with the work and have that be truly part of the work. And so yeah, that's why I think it is you know
Okay, and what about the last days? I mean, before the days that, could we look at them very briefly? Do you have
the
5 minutes still? Or
what days?
the everydays, we were looking at the last ones, going backwards, we looked at two. We looked
This
at three.
one,
We looked at three. This one. Okay, this, what day was that? Well, whatever. What was that coming from, do you think?
this was again, this to me is much more sort of like abstract in
It was called Repair or something like that.
there was a lot of things going on that day. But it was a very chaotic day that I needed to sort of decompress. And so some of these are like very personal. Nobody's going to know what they mean at all. I would say at least half of them.
There's a black ball and a white ball there. So there's positive and negative.
Positive and negative, but the positive is above the negative. So there's tiny little things like that that again only make sense to me. And maybe I'll explain these things more, some of these codes of these things that I have in my mind or why I put these things.
But you prefer not to.
I prefer not to for the moment, but again, maybe I will write them down and that will be something everybody discovers after I die. I don't know.
That would be important, for the
Yeah.
archive, by the way.
Yes, I think it would probably be good for me to actually explain why I did a lot of these pieces, because otherwise nobody will ever know, like the black and white ball thing, which is in a lot of pieces, to be quite honest.
Yeah, we've spoken a lot about that, and Melancholia, the film, and so on. This is like you went to see Barbie or something?
This I think was we went to see Barbie. Actually, have you seen that movie?
No, I haven't yet. I saw Oppenheimer, as I told you, but not Barbie.
Wait, did you like Oppenheimer or did you not?
Well, I don't think it's the best Christopher Nolan film. I mean, it's not Interstellar. It's not. But I thought that the second half, when there was this weird time lapse and overlap in the trial or the non-trial, I thought that was much better than the first part. First part looks like a Netflix series, like all these episodes, one after another, cut, 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 to get all the story in. Um, so of course, I mean, I thought it, and the last like punchline, I told you, I wrote to you that I thought it was about AI, that he's referring to AI actually,
I
more
know, I
than,
kept thinking about AI during it, and it was just like as they're talking about and they're fucking building this shit, and then people like ethically like, oh, we shouldn't build this, and like, yeah, it was just I couldn't help but think about like, wow, are we at this fucking moment right now and we don't realize
maybe,
that we're building a fucking bomb?
maybe, yes. Maybe, yes,
What was
because
interesting to me too, and really like stood out, is that as soon as that discovery was made, and who knows if this is historically accurate or not, they like immediately were like, well, this could be used to make a bomb. like, like immediately it was like, wait, here's this new discovery that has nothing to do with making a bomb. It's like, wait, we could use this to make a fucking bomb.
yeah. But I also think that it's coming out at a time which is slightly problematic because all of this research on clean nuclear energy, um, it's not helpful. It's like a movie that's not exactly helpful. And it encourages this mixture of this confusion between the military use of the nuclear and the non-military use, and
True.
which is not, and nuts to confuse them. So that was, it was okay. I don't think it was his best film, but
That
the
was good.
Barbie
I thought it was good.
one I haven't seen. What do you think about it?
The what?
The Barbie film.
I thought the Barbie film was good. I felt like it was a little too wokey for my.
Whoa. Ah, that's funny because I think it's the opposite without having seen it. Without having seen it, I mean, I understand the story is wokey, like is wokey, but actually, what it does is place a very white character with blonde hair right in the middle of everybody imaginary gaze in a moment when the white body is not representable in the art world at all, and right now, so I found it, from I haven't seen it, but I think it's strategically actually a repositioning, a kind of yeah, whiteness.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really. I think it deals a lot more with gender than race. I didn't personally think race was a huge piece of it, but
No, it wasn't, it's just
I
surprising.
think that's interesting because I think we've been somewhat conditioned over the last couple of years to place that. Like you're sort of like, well, it's white people and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, to me it has nothing to do with race at all. And yet, if something doesn't have to do with race, it's kind of like almost this statement now too. Like you took a statement from it that them not putting black people in it was like, what are you doing? And it's sort of like,
Yeah,
it's kind of like, what do you mean, what am I doing? I'm just making a movie that's not about race, because not everything is about race. Like, but it's like weird now because it's like everything kind of has to be definitely edit all this shit.
yeah, but you know what I think? I don't think that the thing about race is really about race. I think that the thing about coloredness is really about the digital, and it's like about the avatars, that this obsession with, I mean, my idea is that there's like a collective subconscious that has colored the figures, and it's not really about slavery and race and rights, but it's about avatarness, or the condition of avatarness, of simply painting a body. And that's why there's so many tattoos in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So that the default color, the default just white, the absence of anything, is not interesting in the digital era. And secondly, we're all slaves to AI. So it's kind of like when Kennedy was saying, we're all Berliners, ich bin ein Berliner. It's almost like teaching people that we will all be subjected to this control, to this lack of freedom, to this decision making by someone else. And we're all like entering into this state of some forms of slavery in the next hundreds of years, of the machines or of the program.
And that could certainly be the case. That definitely could be the case.
So a kind of idealization of the concept of the slave in the past. I don't know, but these are things that I think about sometimes.
So one other thing, maybe I got a couple seconds here.
Yes.
This is just Trump's mugshot or whatever.
He's gone. Yeah.
Do you know of an artist named Brad Trammell?
No, maybe not.
So he makes these series of videos. I would be very interested. I think you would find them very interesting. He seems like a very, very smart dude. And he makes these videos, and they're about half-hour long, and he sells them through his Patreon thing. I can get you a link to it or whatever.
Okay,
but
thank you.
Like, they're very, very, very analytical, and they are, in my opinion, very like smart, and I think bring up a lot of very interesting points about society and art and aesthetics and all these things we just talked about with rules and blah blah blah.
I'd love to watch them.
I would the last one he released, it was just like, oh my god, this is like fucking.
Okay, Brad, and the last name is?
I'll send it to you. I'll send you a link to it.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna watch it immediately. I mean, not now, but in half an hour. No, I'd like to. Absolutely. Thank you. Okay.
I gotta bounce here. We should plan one of these not so far out so we have less to talk about.
Yes. Well, the idea for me was like every month at the beginning. But the thing is, I like Friday. I like Friday at 9 p.m. but you don't like Friday.
No, Friday's fine. It's just that dude's coming tomorrow.
I know, but in general, I just like Friday.
Friday works. Most Fridays work.
Because I generally don't have like 100,000 things the next day.
Friday's good for me too. No, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, let's fix them a couple weeks out here, and we'll chat again not so long from now.
Okay.
Awesome. Talk soon.
Bye.